Hi everyone, and welcome to today's fun and exciting webinar. And remember, it's don't be a fool, use the tools. It's not other things that you might think that it is.
Hi everyone, I'm Levi from NLT Insurance, and we're going to run you through what's happening in the current cyber landscape in regards to current real-world examples in Australia, as well as how insurance is reacting to this and what recommendations we have for you around the use of business tools.
And I'm Mitch from Colton Computers. I'm talking about some of the tools, some of the things that we're seeing, and I guess one of the main reasons why we're starting to run these joint webinars with our local friendly insurance broker is that cyber is a very complex issue, and it's not something IT can fix alone, and it's not something insurance can fix alone, and so we have to take a holistic approach.
Yep, and work together to make sure that you're covered and that any issues that do come up can be handled correctly and properly.
Quick high-level agenda, current risk landscape, what's going on, what are we seeing at the moment, and specifically what are we seeing in the Central West, because this affects us. It doesn't just affect other people in other places. It affects people in our communities. Essential set of tools and processes that all businesses should be using to stay safe. Understand and how to leverage your tool set properly, understand what tools you do use, understand what tools you don't use. And tips for spotting funny alerts, emails and notifications. Finally, and when you should flag stuff. And the answer to the bottom one I'm going to skip to the beginning is our help desk loves hearing about things even when they're nothing. We would much rather go, no, it's nothing to worry about, than you clicked on something and something really bad happened and you rang up to say, hey, my computer's doing funny things and I can't access any of my files. Look, risk, at the end of the day, cybersecurity is all about risk management and risk mitigation. The big risks are direct company downtime. Can't run business, can't get product out the door, can't service clients. There's the medium to long-term reputational impact of not being able to deliver those services. If you get ransomed, there's the cost of ransom or mitigation for cleaning up crypto. And the government has now set a precedent, haven't they, Levi?
Yes, they have. So they have now introduced fines for businesses that have multiple or continuous breaches or cyber-related events where they haven't fixed the issues that have gone on. Those fines can go up to as much as $50 million for these fines. The fines, the way they are calculated is based on the revenue of the business. So the larger the revenue, the larger the fine. And that's the way they calculate those fines. The first of these fines has actually now been implemented to a business. They have not published which company that has been assigned to, but I believe that is going to be published in the not too distant future, so we will know what happened in that particular circumstance and why the fine was issued.
And it's good to see the government actually getting some teeth behind this legislation, because it's sort of been a toothless tiger for a really long time.
It has. Since the main sort of framework was introduced in 2019, the government sort of just sat back and hasn't sort of really utilised the main functions of that legislation. But now we're starting to see that they are rolling it out, and we are seeing the results from that with fines now being issued. And it's not just for the big end of town. It's not the big corporations that are going to be targeted by this. It's anyone from small single-person operations, sole traders, all the way through to publicly listed companies.
And the biggest thing with this legislation is that it's not there to punish people that are trying to do the right thing. It's out there for people that are having a blatant disrespect for information and data security.
That's exactly right. The way they view it is, it's not when you've had a single event and it's, you've done either a single process wrong or a single incident has occurred. That's not where they're coming after you. It's where you've had that one incident and then it happens again and then it happens again. That's when they're coming after.
And you're not doing anything to mitigate that risk.
That's exactly right. No one's sort of doing anything to stop or prevent that further. They're not educating their staff. That's when they're saying, okay, enough's enough. We need to sort of punish this type of...
Good segue into the next bit on education front. So we use the cyber coverage trifecta as a good way to sort of, I guess, I don't know, visualize all the different things. So cyber insurance, which shouldn't be the thing driving all of this, but it is because...
Yep. With all of this now, insurers are driving what they want to see businesses do for best practice, safe practice operations within their organisations. They're starting to state that, look, if you want cover from us, you need to have things like MFA in there. You need to have education programs into your business, good password management across the board, all the way down from CEOs, directors, down to entry-level admin staff. They want to make sure that all of this is educated all the way through from top to bottom, and that everyone is aware to prevent the major circumstances happening.
Oh, totally. And a lot of, I guess, what cyber insurance, and we see privileged account access on the donut, and we see password management. Those are really tools that cyber insurance and education can use to audit that your process is actually right.
Yep.
Because for most businesses, it's not practical for an insurance audit-esque process to go through all of your business process, and so they're using those things to make sure that your process is up to spec. And then also the other part of that is making sure that you have appropriate tools in your business, and whether that's some anti-CEO spoofing, so that's just to flag if an email from Mitch Colton's actually coming from Mitch Colton, or it's coming from somewhere external to the business pretending to be Mitch Colton. Your traditional antivirus spam filtering, and now we're starting to see a lot higher prevalence of what's called MDR, which is managed detection and response, which is that active monitoring, keeping an eye out for you, making sure that nothing dodgy is going on.
Yeah. So with the way insurance companies are viewing this now is, if you've got these processes and tools in place, they want you to succeed. So if you do have a claim and you've done everything right, you've got all the correct tools in place, processes for staff, they're putting these claims straight through and saying, look, you've done everything right. We're going to respond to come in and protect you with their cyber insurances. And their premiums reflect that. When you have implemented these processes, the premiums actually reflect it. If you don't have these processes and tools in place, the insurers either don't want to insure, or the premiums that they charge are exponential.
And that's certainly a big thing that we're seeing, is that it's all about risk. So if you've implemented all the right controls and tools in your business, you've got the right tools, you've got the right methodology, you're lower risk, therefore your insurance is cheaper. And in the event that you do have a one-off incident, you've got a much better chance of continuing to get insurance, and your premium's not going to get jacked through the roof at that point.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So we promised that we were going to talk about cybersecurity landscape, so let's get into it. We're seeing a heap of little attack. Oh, not little attacks. The probably the biggest thing that we've seen since the end of last year, when we had the Medicare breach, the Optus breach, and now what's the new one of last week? The
finance group.
Yeah, the Afterpay. It's not Afterpay, but the buy now, pay later company. Anyway, total mental bank, doesn't matter. The reality is there's been some really big data breaches that have occurred last year that have sort of compromised a large swathe of the Australian community. And what that means is not that Levi is going to get targeted by the cyber criminals, or Mitch is going to get targeted by cyber criminals. It means that there's a whole lot of sets of data and information around Levi and around Mitch. And so what attackers are now doing, and we were dealing with an incident last week where about 100 accounts at this client's business got compromised. And it was because their clients had reused the same passwords they'd used for their Optus account, their Medibank private account. And so all attackers are doing now is they're getting the lists of people's names, passwords, email addresses, and they're just trying it on every single website and platform they can and just seeing what they hit.
Yeah, and that is becoming one of the most common thing is just people reusing the same password over and over and over again. And it's easy pickings for these criminals to come in and compromise not just one of your systems, but multiple, because your password's the same across the board.
And where that, that's very much, I guess, on the individual. Where that affects businesses, and this is why MFA, you'll hear everyone talk about MFA to the cows come home. Because if Mitch, is on an aeroplane forum and uses a password, and that's fine. If his aeroplane forum account gets done, probably doesn't matter. However, if I'm using that same password then for my work account, it was easy to compromise the forum. Yeah. I'm now just going to give a go at logging into Office 365 with Mitch's work email address and that password. Look, I'm in, but can't get in because we've got MFA enabled. And that's one of the big things that Colton Computers as a company push is that you have to have MFA because at the moment, it still makes up for a whole lot of lack of process and lack of personal information security. The day will come and we've seen some attacks like Uber last year where attackers are trying to get around and are working out ways to get around MFA, but at the moment it's still a pretty good catch-all. So, that's probably the breaking news. And business email compromise is still massive. But at the end of the day, they're all just trying to get you to put your credentials, get a set of credentials that work into a platform, and then they get in and they go for it.
Yeah. And a simple thing that people can make sure they do is, vary up and change their passwords. But not just that. If you do that, don't save it in a Word document on your desktop saying passwords.
Yeah, or an Excel sheet with a password on it, because we can break an Excel password in about 35 seconds, and there's a heap of off-the-shelf tools. If you just Google, how do I break a password on Excel, you'll work it out pretty quick. Yeah. Look, there's a heap of password managers out there. There's Dashlane, there's LastPass, just to name two. LastPass copped a little bit of flack last year because they had a data breach in their own right. But again, this goes back to good passwords and password reuse, which was, and there's a couple of posts on our blog about it if you want to read more. But one, that it's been compromised, so go and change your passwords. Two, if you had a good master password or you had a federated account to your Office 365, it can't be brute force because the password's so long. Yeah. But if you had, I like fluffy cats as your password to get into your password manager, chances are that a third-party threat actor, that's the new buzzword of the industry, right? Third-party threat actor is just going to get in and take all your passwords.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's, I guess, and it's not scary. It comes across as scary, but it's not scary. It's good old risk management. It's the same. This is just the next generation of, I'm sure every business has padlocks on their front door when they leave. They have an alarm system, and they don't leave the roller door unlocked. We're just dealing with the cyber equivalent
of that, exactly. And multi-factor is basically, it's deadlock.
Yeah.
To work it out for your normal house or your business, get a deadlock, MFA. Every business should be using it. So
so that's that. We'll get into a couple of real world examples now, because being Australians, we all have an attitude of she'll be right and that'll happen to someone else, not to me.
Yep. So one of the first examples we got is the bricklayer. So this was an example that was published a little while ago by the Insurance Council, where a sole trader bricklayer based up in Queensland, his insurance broker for a few years had been trying to convince him to get cyber insurance. Said, look, it's going to protect you. If someone gets into your email, gets into your systems, they could compromise your bank account, your email, you can lose money in relation to this. So after a few years, the bricklayer finally capitulated and said, yep, I'm going to get cyber insurance, took out a $1 million cyber liability policy with his insurance broker. About 9 months after that, he started to realise that a bunch of invoices that he had sent out hadn't been paid, and he chased it up, and the people had told him that, no, we have actually paid those invoices and we paid it to the new bank details that you had stated in your email. What had happened was that his email had been compromised, but not just that, they had gotten fully into his system as well and had gotten into his bank account. They had also changed his passwords and had siphoned money out of his account. Now, in this particular instance, he had the cyber liability insurance, which indemnified him for the loss. So all in all, his total loss for this claim was $78,000. Now, for a sole trader bricklayer, who's just a one-person operation, if he didn't have this insurance, it would have closed his business. But in this instance, the insurer indemnified him, they covered the loss, they had an emergency response service in that policy as well, which means that his IT group that worked with the insurance company came in, they fixed everything up, got him back up and running, money got replenished, and he was back up and running.
And he learned a good lesson from it?
And he learned a very good lesson from it, which was change your password.
Have MFA.
Have MFA, and cyber insurance saved his business.
Yeah, and the thing that I think is really important there, and Levi didn't do it justice because he's representing the insurance industry, is cyber policies for most SMBs, SMEs that doesn't have incident response isn't worth having.
That is exactly right.
That was very blunt, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's true though. It's true, and there are policies out there, to be honest, that if they don't have an incident response, then they're not going to be there for when you really need them.
And essentially what we're getting at here is that they take the traditional insurance approach, which is you go and clean everything up, you fix it all up, and you just send us the bill at the end and we'll pay it.
And after the fact. But a lot of the time, a lot of businesses do not recover from that instance because the compromise could be that substantial. They can't afford the process of fixing it up first before the insurer will respond. So for any cyber insurance, I would definitely recommend making sure that policy has a proper emergency response system in place and that they have an emergency response phone number, and print that number out, keep it on your desk, put it in your
mobile phone.
Put it on your mobile phone, put it on the whiteboard in the office so everyone is aware. If an incident occurs, there's the number, call that number straight away.
And look, depending on your business, everything's a bit different and there's other ways to mitigate it. But for most SMEs, they don't have the internal tools, skill set, whatever, to be able to deal with that. Yep. And not to mention when you're dealing with when you're dealing with some platforms and some companies, they don't actually have a system at their end to deal with you as an individual. Whereas if the insurers, forensic IT people are ringing up, they'll get a much better response out of the provider than if you ring up and go, oh, hey, I've been hacked. And I was next thing, which again we're bashing on about credential reuse here.
Yeah.
There's a number of attacks, and it's not all of them, and this is just a subset. But unfortunately, and we alluded to this with the government working out their new, finally finding someone for misuse. The government is very much in a data collection phase at the moment. Yep. The incident I was dealing with last week, I rang up the ACSC, which is the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, and talked to them. They were really good, got all the information. Then they put me in touch with the AFP, and the AFP pretty much go, yeah, it's cyber, what happened? Were you doing all the right things? Yeah, cool. Here's a case number, the end by. They don't have the capability or the systems to deal with it yet. And so it's very much relying on the business itself, or the business and their insurer, or the business and their MDR provider, or whoever to be mitigating and rolling that up.
Yeah. And some of the market leading insurers at the moment, they've worked on it for enough years now. They have processes in place to streamline these reporting processes, if it's a large compromise, being able to do the public statements and help draft them for basically reputational damage that can occur after a cyber
and it's
breach.
things like taking over your social media accounts to make sure that you're updating and responding to customers in a timely manner.
Yeah.
That you're contactable. All of those things. Like there's been plenty of cyber attacks and it's certainly on the rise. We haven't seen this specific thing firsthand yet, where attackers are porting phone numbers, and so they're just taking your business's phone number, setting up a call center, and imitating and pretending to be your business. They might have done business email compromise as well, so they might be seeing the side of your email. You don't necessarily have a safe way to communicate with your client. And that's something that can. But we could talk about that all day. The biggest thing at the moment we alluded to at the top of this was credential reuse. Stop it. Just kill it. Stop it. Businesses just get a password manager. There's two parts of credential reuse. There's Mitch uses the same password for everything. And then the second part is that Mitch works in a small team with 3 other people, and we all log into the company Facebook account and we all share the same password. The issue there is twofold, which is that Fred leaves the team and leaves the business. Do you have a process in place to change that password when Fred leaves? Do you know when Fred logged into it last? Do you the list goes on, and then if something goes wrong, how do you prove that it was Fred or it was Levi or it was Mitch? You can't. Whereas if you use password management, Levi logs in with Levi's account, goes, I need the password for Facebook. It just autofills it. Levi can't actually see that password. It just autofills. Levi gets access, can get on with his job. But importantly, if anything happens, it's logged that Levi was the person that logged in.
That logged in at that time, exactly.
And especially in light of these large data breaches, and we're seeing more and more of them happening. We're seeing more larger data breaches happening at a more frequent pace than ever before. So, the year is young. I suspect we're going to see another 4 or 5 before the end of the year, and it's going to make this credential reuse a bigger issue.
Because last year we had two majors last year.
And they're in the back quarter of the year.
In the back quarter of the year, exactly. And so far, Latitude is the name of that organisation that has been done already this year. And in all honesty, there is going to be much larger organisations that are going to be hit.
And the thing to consider just on that before we move on, because this was the case with Optus, this was the case with Medibank Private, this was the case with Latitude. Are you keeping client data that you don't need to keep or longer than you need to keep it? So one of the big things that Latitude's getting dragged over the coals for is they have people's driver's licenses and other personally identifiable information from customers they had 8-9 years ago. That are no longer current customers. They don't have a need to be keeping that data, but they've kept it. This is one thing that Europe and GDPR has been very big on. That's the General Data Protection Regulation for Europe. If you want to read more, there's a blog post about it. But one of the big things that came out of that was you need to be able to justify to the regulator why you are keeping the information you are keeping, you should only be keeping the information that you need to keep.
And I think we're going to see, in the insurance landscape, definitely, we are seeing that some of the biggest players in the cyberspace are moving into starting to request encryption of all data that is in the organisation, to the point where there are insurers now that are going to start issuing their terms encrypted to clients for extra security. So with insurers moving that way, it will be in the next 18 months that we will see that being a big requirement in the cyber insurance landscape.
Oh, massively. And when we say don't keep data you don't need to keep, that doesn't mean keep their email address, their contact information. That's fine. That's a marketing purpose, and we refer to it very much as the white pages policy. If it's information that you could find in the white pages, it's probably okay to have. Because even if it does get breached, it's not going to give a potential attacker any information they couldn't find anywhere else publicly available
anyway. Yeah.
So whereas if you're keeping driver's licenses, medical records are a bit different again. But if you're keeping ex-employee data, all of that sort of stuff, make sure you know how long you have to keep it, and only keep it for that long, and then get rid of it.
Exactly. Yeah. Our next point is all about file sharing.
And all the links.
And all the links. Do you know where these links have come from? Are you expecting a particular document to be shared with you?
Are you? Yeah, and look, and this has been going around, and they're getting better now, especially now that ChatGPT is out in the wild.
Yep.
And non-English native speakers can now go and get a copy of. I tested this when ChatGPT came on. I went, can please give me an example of a state debt recovery notice for a parking fine? Yep. Perfect. Literally copy it, put letterhead on it. You have an exact SDRO claim letter.
Yep.
So why I bring up this example is that if your organisation is a Microsoft shop, good on you. You're getting OneDrive share links. You're expecting them. I'm getting one from Levi. I know Levi was sending me something.
Yep.
Happy days. Click on it. You know that a colleague is working on a document and wants you to review it. You check that it's it's from them.
Yep.
You should have external organisation spoofing turned on in your email anyway.
Yep.
You know it's internal. You know you're expecting it. Happy days. But in that same scenario, if you're a Microsoft shop and you get an email from Levi and it's a Google Drive link, and you're going, hang on, but we use Microsoft.
Yeah.
Why is Levi sending me something using a Google Drive link? You should be asking questions.
Exactly. Pick up the phone. Simplest thing, pick up the phone, speak to that person directly and say, I've received this link, is this you?
Yeah.
Simple process, but it could save you.
Because we get used to, especially if we're on a mobile phone, we're in a hurry, we've logged on from home because we left our work computer, laptop at the office. You're used to logging into Office 365 every day or G Suite every day.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to just go, oh yeah, I've got to log in, click the link, put in my username and password.
Yep.
And then it's too late. You just put username and password in.
You're gone.
Yeah. And if that does happen, by the way, pick up the phone to your IT people straight away and go, I just did a dumb. We will not be upset. We will jump on it. We have a process, computers, we have a process to deal with that. Don't sit there and be worried that you've done something wrong and not tell anyone, because that's when bad things
happen. Yeah, exactly. The sooner that your IT company knows, and if you've got cyber insurance, the emergency response team know, the sooner the better.
Oh, 100%. And on the topic of file sharing, if you see a USB stick on the ground, don't pick it up, put it in your computer. If someone gives you a USB stick and you don't know and trust them, don't put it in your computer.
Don't.
From an IT point of view, we would much rather you were clicking on OneDrive links than you were putting random USB sticks into computers.
Yeah.
Just don't.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing a Q&A session at the end, so if anybody has some questions, start putting them in the chat and we will get to that at the end.
Yep.
As we've alluded to through the presentation, there's some common errors. Have MFA.
Yep.
2FA. Think about, I was dealing with a new third party the other day and I had to log into their ticketing portal and I was like, oh, this doesn't have an option to turn MFA on. So I put a support ticket in and I was like, how do I turn on MFA in your platform? Oh, our platform doesn't support it. Oh, so, for us now, that's a bit of a red flag. If we're using a provider and we have to log into something and we can't either single sign on, so link it to your Google account or your Microsoft account, or put MFA on it, it's kind of like, I don't know if I really want to be using this platform.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Because it's a toehold. If someone can compromise your account there, it's getting them closer to that trusted circle to then compromise something. And this is why we talk about supply chain attacks a lot in the industry, because breaking into the Reserve Bank vault's hard, but working out the subcontracting cleaning company that does cleaning and compromising them is probably a whole lot easier.
Yeah, exactly.
Educate.
Yeah.
Cyber insurance is getting there. I'm going to pick on insurers for a minute. They're talking about you must do formalised cyber training once a year. That's crap. you need a culture of security in your business. Insurers haven't worked out an easy way to audit that yet, so that's why they're going, you need to do formal cyber training once a year.
And that's exactly it. They've quantified it to the most basic level, but they're stating, once a year, but they want you to change the culture.
Yeah.
Everyone to be educated, keep up to date on the latest scams and compromises that are happening, so you and your staff are aware.
Yeah, and on that, we see it time and time again, and I know if you're doing recruitment or your HR people, they see you put up an ad, you're getting phished.
Yeah.
They see a new employee starting, the new employee's getting phished, and the HR people and payroll are getting phished.
Yep.
It's attackers are watching social media, are watching business websites. They're looking for a con. It's the old con game. It's just gone digital. Keep abreast of in your industry what best practice is. Talk to your insurance broker. Actually, make sure you have a good insurance broker and you talk to them and be friends with them. I talk to Levi way too much, but it's important to know what your requirements are, because it's a very fast-moving industry. The same as talk to your IT people, ask lots of questions. We really don't mind.
Exactly. Pick up the phone. We're more than happy to help. Mitch and I, we're always on the phone to people talking about cyber all the time, about best practices, what things can be done to protect you and your business.
As we alluded to before, flag anything. If anything doesn't seem normal, just ask the question.
Yep.
Big thing, and insurers are mandating this, and make sure you have a policy for it and a paper trail to prove that you've done it.
Yep.
Verify bank details over the phone.
Yes.
If you have someone new, a new supplier, a new employee, make sure you have either face-to-face confirmed the bank details or do it over the phone. Levi has a good story about the attackers that got into an email account, compromised it about 2 months out, sent an email a month out saying we're changing bank account details.
Yep. And basically what happened with that particular one, that they changed those details. This actually happened to an insurance company where...
What, they're not perfect?
They're not perfect. They're not perfect. Basically, what happened was they compromised multiple emails for settlements that were being done, and they ended up losing nearly $1.9 million by compromising that email, just changing details on incoming emails for claim settlements and so forth.
And people weren't making a phone call to check the bank account details?
No one was dual authenticating. They were just sending it through, and then everyone, the insurer on the other end, was just processing. No one dual authenticated on either side. So that's how compromises happen.
And we see it a lot, especially across the Central West, because we deal with a lot of clients. You're only as good as the weakest link in your supply chain. So your security might be really good, but if one of your suppliers or one of your customers has lacked security, that's why everyone needs to community collective effort.
Yeah.
And know what a phony alert looks like, which really comes down to if you're used to seeing an invoice from Colton Computers, you know what it looks like.
Yeah.
If you see one that doesn't look the same, pick up the phone. Look, people change platforms and systems from time to time. It may be that the client, the customer, or the supplier you're dealing with is just swapped from Mob Zero or Zero to another accounting product, and the invoice looks different. But ask the question. So that's the end of our formal bit. We'll now throw over to Q&A and answer some questions.
Yep.
Vivian has asked a probably loaded question. How can you stop people from reusing credentials? What is an easier way to control this from a management perspective? Because people will likely share their details with people. In a corporate sense, easiest thing to do is have a password manager as part of your corporate environment.
Yep.
Depending on your organisation, your tools, your platforms and your systems, SSO is the gold standard. So SSO is single sign-on. What that means is that you log in with one username and password, usually your work email address and a password, and that is your credential for everything that you do in the business. Unfortunately, especially in smaller business, not everything supports SSO. And you go back to the Facebook example I was using with Levi before, which is you have some accounts that have to be shared. So that's where you use a password manager that's integrated with your single sign-on. So then the only way people can access that password is through using the password manager. And the reality is, if you make it easy for your staff to do the right thing, they will do it. So people generally will do things the easiest way possible. So if you have a well set up password manager, a single sign-on system, people will use it because it's just easier.
Yeah, exactly. And by having those systems in place, it makes insurers happy. The way they look at it is you're doing the right thing, you've got good process and protocol. So, yeah. Single sign-on. Just do single sign-on.
Jess has asked, what do you do when you receive an email that you think is a spam? We had a zero email to a colleague asking them to activate their invitation. They were clever enough to call the bookkeeper and question if they invited them. They didn't. Is ignoring the email enough? The process that your colleague went through is exactly bang on perfect. They get 10 gold stars from IT. Look, you should forward that through to your IT support people and say, hey, I got this, it's dodgy. Because even though we see a lot of those attacks come from a lot of different random email addresses all the time, we will see systems, because we will see systemic patterns where we'll see 20 clients getting hit with random zero-esque emails, but they'll all be coming from one IP range somewhere in the world. And so we'll just go, oh cool, we'll just block that IP range. So it doesn't help that one instance, but it helps everybody else overall. Overall, ignoring it is a good first step, but flick it through to support and they will love it. Viv's asked another question. Cyber insurance. If we have it but we aren't following the process, will my company be liable? Levi, this is all yours.
Yes. So, okay, if you have cyber insurance and you've declared something in the statement to the insurer and then you're not doing it,
and you go to claim,
the insurer has the right to refuse the claim under that circumstance because it's seen as non-compliant to your declaration. So be aware, if you state something, do it. If you're uncertain, a lot of the cyber insurers actually now have an option that state, I do not know. So if they ask a question, do you have multi-factor? And you go, I don't know. You can answer, I don't know. Do you do password update every 90 days? I don't know. I
argue that with insurers.
Insurers, yes. And that is now a question across the board for the 90-day update. But if you clearly state, yes, I do something, I back up my systems daily, but in actuality, you do it once every 6 months or don't do it at all, come claim time, I think you're in for a pretty nasty surprise.
And even if your insurer does partially cover you that time, you're probably going to go on a no reinsurance list.
That's exactly right. They could then basically offer a declinature. And if it's an official declinature, that's on your record. That's 5 years that it's going to sit there, and it's going to make not just cyber insurance difficult, but all insurance is difficult because it's seen as you've done something wrong in the insurer's eyes. So.
And last question from anonymous attendee. How likely is it that a company would actually have to pay the maximum fine for a cyber breach? Look, as we said at the beginning, if you're doing all the right things, you're probably going to be fine. The fines are really there for people that are getting done time and time
offenders,
again.
Yeah.
I was talking to another owner of another IT company 3 months ago, and he had a solicitor client who'd been done 6 times, had his email compromised, had cyber attack, email compromised, refused to change his email password. Those are the sort of people that those fines are
going after. Yeah, exactly.
And again, it's like it's like Viv's question for what happens if I don't do what my insurance policy says? Well, the insurer isn't going to help you. The government's probably also going to come along
and fine you, appropriately.
One of the biggest things, and we saw this with the cyber incident I was dealing with last week, is that the government are very much in a we want to learn and understand mode at the moment. Yeah. So all the guidelines, even around data breach, it's all about notification. Let us know, because they're trying to gather data to work out if there's a systemic issue, how they're going to do fines legislation going forward, how they're going to manage this risk at a country level. Yeah. And so all of not all, but most of the fines and most of the thou shouts are thou shalt tell us about it, so we can add it to our stats.
Yeah, exactly. And something to keep in mind as well with those fines, as we said, repeat offenders, and the fines are being based on your revenue. So yes, it can go up to 50 million, but
if you're a $500,000 a year turnover business, it's not going to be a big fine.
But yeah, exactly.
The reason that governments are starting to go towards these percentage of revenue fines is started with Europe, with GDPR, because they want a fine to hurt Google and Microsoft as much as it hurts Fred Smith's plumbing.
Well, exactly, yeah. And these fines, we first saw them in Australia a few years ago with banking issues, where some of the larger banks were non-compliant with their APRA and ASIC requirements. So when we saw these fines and people were like, oh, they're getting fines of over $1 billion, everyone was a bit shocked, but it's based on their revenue.
And so it's meant to hurt the same amount whether you're little or you're big.
Exactly, yeah. So it's meant to make sure that, it hurts and you don't do it again.
Cool. If there's no other questions, we might wrap up. Thanks everyone for attending today. It's been great. I'm Mitch Colton. This is Levi. And thanks for listening to us chat about cyber.
Thank you.